All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have another robust roundtable, international roundtable. I am Billy Bob on the left coast. I've got Ben Toth from Pech, Hungary. Wouter, but that's Walter in English. Walter is in Brussels, correct, sir?
Near Brussels, yes.
Near Brussels, fair.
Yep.
And Ian Kummer, as always, from a suburb in Moscow, or the suburbs of Moscow. Which is it? There's probably multiple suburbs in Moscow.
Yes, it's a suburb, yes.
A suburb. Thank you for
Ian's in only one of them.
Yes, there's a bunch of these smaller little towns. And Mutishi is actually interesting because it was the first full water system to be built in Russia. In Mutishi, and it's actually it's on. Oh, I don't remember. Late 18th century, I think.
Okay, so that was
Imperial Russia.
Yes, Imperial Russia. Yes, so it's the very first.
Stalin credit, but okay.
No. I mean, Russians. Yeah, please don't say that. Russians had running water before Stalin. It wasn't.
Before anything else,
not have electricity. Many did not have electricity.
Yes,
but electrification. I wanted to ask the defender of the fatherland. Were there any celebrations? Anything you attended? Because that's today.
I did not. I was writing today. I did not go anywhere. Putin did his wreath laying by the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. He did that tradition. There's various celebrations. So if you want to go out today, there were things to do, and I'm probably going to do something this weekend because, of course, there's Saturday and Sunday which you can do. So it's kind of a 3-day.
Yeah, we have different stuff
holiday weekend.
We have tractors, that's what we do.
Yes.
Maybe Walter can tell us. I don't know if that's still the case in Belgium. I know it is in France, in Spain, other places. But yeah, that's how we celebrate.
We did not get through our introductions. We got stuck on Ian. So Carlos also joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for enduring that for us. So the title of our program is To the Very Last Ukrainian. That, of course, is a reference to, the U.S. strategy, the Western strategy vis-a-vis Ukraine to weaken Russia is just to, sacrifice as many Ukrainians as possible in an effort to, demonize and weaken Russia. So how is that going for them, guys?
We're approaching the 2-year anniversary of the SMO, which is tomorrow, which obviously the West puts great emphasis on because they want new sanctions, they want to steal the assets and all that. But from what I can tell, maybe Ian has more insight, it's going really, really bad. Like most of the videos I see of not just, Ukrainian people in the trenches, but English-speaking American, South Africans, they're like, fuck the government, we're going home, fuck you. People are telling the recruiters to fuck off. There's villages without men. It really is draining to the last Ukrainian. All in all, I mostly want to talk about the Western insanity now that we come to the 2-year mark, but maybe Ian has a bit more.
Well, yes, and if you look at even just the Western estimates, that Western BBC, Media Zone, Russian casualty tracker, you can see there's a very noticeable drop-off in recorded Russian casualties. And I think that's just because you had that big Ukrainian offensive, which just petered out with no gains, and their stockpiles went with it. They're conserving ammunition best they could up to that offensive, shot off so much that now they're back to a trickle. It's just living hand to mouth.
Oh, there was a Reuters special video investigation saying even not handgun, but the machine gun ammunition, they're rationing. Not just shells, but the basic, Kalashnikov stuff.
Yeah,
so really bad.
So because it's all about, it's an artillery war. It's all about counter battery. If the Russians shoot at you, you try to pinpoint their location of their artillery and shoot your artillery at it. But if you just take 100 rounds and you can only fire 2 or 3 back, it's not at all a fair fight. You're just stationary target. And it looks like also from everything I've been reading, their transportation is really bad. They've lost so many vehicles. Most of these soldiers, and like that retreat out of Avdiivka, It's just guys on foot mostly. Yes, they pulled out the mechanized infantry they had left first, which was kind of a sign of what was going to happen next, and then everybody else was just stuck on foot. So it was just they're short on everything.
Ian,
yes.
Do you think the level of training or the lack of level of training has something to do with going through shells and bullets way too fast? I imagine if I would be in the trenches, I would panic and shoot everything in 2 minutes.
That's a good question. And the answer is no, even when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's the same thing. If you get into any kind of firefight, you shouldn't have to worry about conserving ammunition. You shoot what you have and then you're resupplied afterwards. Yeah. That's how it's supposed to work. If you're in that mindset, you have to conserve ammunition. I mean, the battle's almost lost to begin with. Yeah. It's not.
That can't be good for morale when you're getting hit and wait, don't fire back yet. Yeah, that's gotta.
I do want to be clear too. When they're giving, you see these stories of these self-propelled howitzers only getting 3 to 5 rounds of ammunition. Yeah. That's distribution. You don't want to give them too much, because if you give someone 10 shells, he might shoot 10 shells. You give them what you want them to shoot, you disperse it. So it doesn't mean they're completely out. They're at the point where they're rationing it really heavily.
There's a book called Techno War in Vietnam, The Perfect War, Techno War in Vietnam. I think the author's name is Gibson. Mm-hmm. And he talks about tens of thousands of rounds were required to kill one Viet Minh or one Viet Cong. And that probably includes women and children and livestock. When you read the book, it's a brilliant book. I recommend it for everyone. And the title of our show is a little misleading, because to the last Ukrainian, millions of Ukrainians had the sense to leave the country. And among them, the Monaco Battalion, which is so named, which lives in Monaco. We should point this out whenever we can to our viewers, and they should pass this on. These are the wealthy people from Ukraine who have fled Ukraine and are living on the Riviera and have
Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, beautiful cars.
Absolutely, just so. The population of Ukraine is I think diminished by about 40%. So that's a disaster in and of itself.
What's the adage or the cliche that wars are made by the rich and fought by the poor? And I mean, it's just true.
Mm-hmm. I do want to clarify the point real quick on ammunition. So it's true. I mean, especially like in wars like Vietnam. I mean, and it's not. I mean, yes, it's true where you'd fire hundreds or thousands of rounds and not to kill anyone. I think that increasingly becomes less true, especially in this war. So I don't know. I, of course, have no idea what the rate is now. But where you mostly know where your targets are and your your targeting process is pretty good. It's not that bad. But it is also true that artillery kills more enemy combatants than small arms fire, and that's become increasingly true since World War I. Every successive war that becomes more true. I mean, there's stories if you read firsthand accounts from both sides. Going back to 2014, Guys was mentioned. You can just go days or weeks without even shooting your rifle. You barely even see the enemy at all. It's all drones and artillery.
And drones are becoming a big part, but they don't replace artillery. Maybe you can make that point. I saw a very good article and a short stream with Brian Berletic, New Atlas guy, very smart guy, comparing like the Western military industrial machine to the Russian one, which Donald Trump just used, and it was hilarious, saying they're a war machine. They defeated Napoleon, they defeated Hitler, and no one should. And basically the Ukrainians saying, no, that's not true. The US defeated Hitler, the British defeated Hitler, and they get fact-checked. They get like community notes, and it's hilarious, like ratio to hell. But anyway, he said that, and he said there's no way they can even replace what they've already given Ukraine, or just come up with the extra capacity within like a 2-year framework. So it really is looking dire, that front. On the map, not much has changed. You mentioned Avdiivka, I guess now finally called Avdiivka, not Avdiivka. Krinky Bridgehead on the south of the Kherson River, those are destroyed. They both were reported by Shoigu to Putin. Not much has changed, but there's a 1,000-kilometer front. And what the Russians call active defense, they're pushing everywhere. And you can see the panic in the leadership in Brussels, in the leadership in Washington, and especially in Kiev. I mean, that guy just doesn't want to stay home for a very long time, it looks like.
And I do want to point out this. I'm sorry, Carl, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was going to say, I mean, Trump, on one hand, it's unfortunate that, both sides of the issue kind of reduce Russia to a stereotype, and I think Americans do that in general. Other countries only exist when we happen to have that for that 3-4 year window, we have a war with them. So the British are the redcoats. When we had, and Germans are the Germans season. Are those soldiers led by the guy with the little mustache, Russians
with the pointy helmets.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of unfortunate we reduce countries to this meme of, that small window when we knew them in a war. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's right. And I think that's generally true too. Unless a country is actually being completely overrun like Germany was in World War II, generally because they're industrializing. Even if you're losing a war, you're trying to industrialize. So if your infrastructure isn't just being destroyed, you're increasing. So like France ended when France was defeated in 1940. They actually ended the war with more planes than they started, even after their army was encircled. So it was a very clear battlefield defeat. And I think, and that's true with Russia. They're not fighting the war on their, in their pre-war territory. They're not losing anything, so there's no reason to think their inventory and the size of their military is not growing. Of course it's growing. So this idea, we'll just wear them down, it's not a sensible strategy, because the more longer they fight a war, the more they'll mobilize and the more they'll have. They'll start larger than they started.
The Western press, it seems to be 50-50, doom and gloom on the one hand, and then Cope saying Ukraine can still win. So, I was looking over the headline compilation.
They're stronger than you think. Yeah,
that Ben provided us, and there's a whole subset of headlines saying, Ukraine can still do this. Ukraine, and then half of them are like, Ukraine is about to lose. It's just bizarre how they, flood the echo chamber with messaging, and contradictory messaging.
I like the Hill one, which came out yesterday, that Ukraine can no longer win. That was the main title. Basically, if you scroll down, even if you get the 60 billion, which has gone down to 50 billion or something. It won't change the future. It won't change the orientation. And I don't know if you guys want to see, I got a couple of clips which I can share just to show two aspects of the Kievan desperation. And I made sure that I actually have the audio clip this time. So here's number one, which is after Putin's wildly successful interview, like 1 billion viewers, Mr. Zelensky sat down with Brett. How do you pronounce him? Brett Baer?
Yeah.
Brett Baer.
Like a Russian bear.
Yeah, somewhere apparently on the front line, but basically it's a set. And just 30 seconds, he basically said let's see what he says.
Putin, you say you want to defeat him militarily. It doesn't mean that we have to deoccupy by military and all our territory from 1991. It's very difficult. You will lose a lot of people and a lot of time, much time, the long war. That's why it's more smart, of course, to decide this question diplomatically. Putin is afraid only of strong, and he's not accepting any weakness. So you have to be strong on the battlefield. Putin.
To my mind, that was the very first time that this guy talked about a diplomatic settlement. Just before we get responses, let me show you Mr. Goncharenko. I'm calling him the nuclear Nazi. I'll explain why. But this is him in with CNN.
We are Ukrainians. We are ready to stand with the United States, shoulder to shoulder, either in trenches near Tehran or near in North Korea or near Beijing. No difference, because we appreciate your support. We are strong enough. We today are the second strongest army in the free world after the United States, and I think we are very valuable ally.
Okay. Thoughts, because those two.
Well,
who wants to go first? Carlo.
I read a couple of articles about how Ukraine could still win the war, and that it was going to be won in the Black Sea because they'd had such success against Russian vessels,
landing vessels,
So I said I want to look this up. They claim that 36, a third of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea had been destroyed. And I said, let me look that up. So first I got a Google thing that said 24 had been damaged or destroyed. So went to a much more reliable source, and I got it. It was down to 11, and 3 of those were patrol boats, and they weren't all destroyed. They were mostly just damaged. But I was reading that it was not only the drones, but it was the power of the Ukrainian aircraft. It was Ukrainian air power that was responsible for a lot of this.
Drone and cruise missiles from the UK and France.
Yeah, and I think they were so that Ukraine could still win the war by using the Black Sea and this. I didn't quite understand. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I noticed that, and I'm rambling on a little here, but I noticed in Ben's cheat sheet this week, he mentioned that Transnistria has approached Russia about unifying. Well, that pretty much puts the lock on Odessa and the port above Odessa, that the Russians are going to want to take that port, and we're going to want to
which
take
is
the whole
actively
coastline.
being hit by Russian cruise missiles, Iskanders, by the way, from the Black Sea fleet.
Yeah,
That
and right
doesn't
up
exist.
to and it links right up to Transnistria. So I think that's in the offing, and I think these guys are probably wrong about the U.S. Ukraine being able to win the war by pounding away at the Black Sea. Anyway,
that's not where the war is being fought. I mean, that's where 3% of the war is being fought, and that's where they're having the most success, definitely, because they have used those Western supplied long range missiles and these underwater drones, even some on top of the water drones. But warfare is changing. That's all new technology, and Russia's got to adjust, and they are. Walter, you were going to say something.
Yes.
I think the point of Transnistria is very important because the battleground can shift to there, and I don't know too much about Transnistria, but I think the people culturally never left the USSR mindset.
Yes, I've seen pictures of the capital, and it looks very Soviet, very beautiful.
So it's a small strip of land, but it's located very interestingly. And I want to know about you guys, what you think about Transnistria. That can be like the lock, the chokehold of Ukraine by Russia. Is that a true statement, or is it?
I don't think Russia had plans for Transnistria. I mean, this news came out from Moldovan languages I had to translate first, and then it hit Ukraine, obviously, because Ukraine loves this news. That on the 28th of February, the MPs are going to hold a vote to join Russia, and obviously Moldova is already in a panic, saying that would mean war or something like that. So that area is heating up, but 2 things need to be known about that place. One is it really is like the Donetsk was. There's Lenin statues, there's with People's Republic, the wreaths, the Red Star everywhere. That's what they're like, and they believe in that motherland. And the second is it's a massive ammo depot. And this already early in the war, the Ukrainians thought, shit, if we could get our hands on that, that would really help us out. So I'm really thinking, there's a couple of vectors. They are thinking about this ammo depot, and they also the Belarusian, not secret service, but military intelligence said there's 100,000 troops basically gathering on our borders. So they might be planning something else. Now, does that look like someone winning the war when they're trying to, as always, expand it into different directions? So I'm not sure what's going to happen. This is you picked out the most speculative part, the future provocations of the cheat sheet. But yeah, these are also, Armenia, Azerbaijan, that area is becoming. Mr. Pashinyan is making some provocative moves as well. But yeah, that's the speculative aspect.
What do you think Russia's take is on the idea of, let's say that Transnistria makes a formal request to join the Russian Federation? I mean, it would have to be approved by the Duma, right? What are the chances that would happen, in your opinion, Ian?
Well, I think when it's just sitting there unsupported, I think that's unlikely. But I think once Transnistria
with Russian peacekeepers there,
make a handful. I mean, it's not a place you can project power from easily. It's not a place that's easy to defend either. I think I think both sides kind of agreed it's kind of a neutral area. That's what, and the Ukrainians, even if Ukrainians were tempted to try to take the ammo dumps there, their bosses in Washington just said, no, you can't. So I don't I don't think Russia would cross the line first in making Transnistria an active participant with what's going on in Ukraine in any way. I think they'd want to wait until Ukraine is resolved until they even think about doing anything with Transnistria. I do want to hit the Black Sea Fleet comments real quick. We should look at World War II. The Black Sea was a very active front. And it's a pond. So if you look at, the German, Romanian, and Soviet fleets that participated, they all suffered very high losses because there's mine warfare, there's aircraft, you're just very vulnerable. There's really no place to hide. And in 1942, when the Soviet Union actually lost Crimea, that kind of doomed the fleet because there was no easy way to maintain it or anything. So it did basically deteriorate pretty much to nothing by the end of the war, but it didn't affect the war itself because it's Black Sea is a part of the war, but it's not so sinking some. So the point is, sinking some ships might feel good and it's good for propaganda purposes, but doesn't influence the war one way or the other. It's not.
I'll add something else to that because I've looked up the history of sort of foreign investments. And before 2014, Britain bought a lot of stuff in Sevastopol, the Black Sea Fleet's headquarters. Mm-hmm. And since 2014, they've bought a lot of stuff in Odessa. They are the ones who really want that. And this was marked, I think, last year. This will be a NATO lake. Just like the Baltic Sea, and if it becomes a Russian sea, that's not just a strategically vital thing, but also economically. If you look at rare metals that the Germans are talking about in Ukraine, it's that south and eastern part. That's where most of it is. That's where most of the industrial GDP is. Now, that doesn't really affect Russia. It doesn't need extra stuff. But what it affects is rump Ukraine, whatever's left. I mean, if that's cut away as well, that country is going to be a financial sinkhole for decades, That's not going to stand up on its 2 feet anytime soon, unless, of course, it's rebuilt and, integrated into Russia. But on its own, Jesus. Yeah, that's how I think it's significant.
The problem with taking it, I don't think they can forcibly take Odessa without destroying it, like with what happened to Mariupol. And Mariupol is a pretty new city, and I say it's not new city, but it was basically leveled the first time it was liberated, and I think it was 1943. 1943 was when Mariupol
They're not going to level it.
Yeah, they're not going to level it. So I think
absolutely not.
It's so. I think as of right now, where Putin says things like, the path Ukraine is going down threatens their sovereignty. I think and that means your sovereignty is still on the table. They're not planning to take away Ukraine's sovereignty, and so Odessa is that carrot, and if you're going to look at the carrot and stick strategy, it's just that Ukraine still has Odessa. They still have a lifeline.
Putin mentioned that last year.
Yes. So,
did you see? Go ahead, Carlo.
No, I just wanted to say that they could go north because the true port, I can't remember the name of it, it's not Odessa. It's above Odessa, and they could just cut off Odessa from the rest of Ukraine. And the problem, Ukraine violated the grain deal that they had set up with Russia to move grain to parts of the world that really needed it, like Africa. After the neo-colonials have destroyed Africa, they needed grain, so they violated that. So and that's what brought on this notion. I don't know. Very early on, I thought that Russia was going to go all the way to Transnistria and take Odessa and that part of this. And now Scott Ritter's on board with that, and Doug McGregor's on board with that, and all these people are on board with that. And I think one of the things that'll happen if that occurs is that'll destabilize Europe even more, because right now the Polish tractors that we just saw in the streets because it's being flooded with Ukrainian grain, undercutting Polish grain, Polish wheat. and that's going to affect all of Europe, and that will further destabilize Europe. So that's to. I don't know if Putin and I don't know if Russia's thinking in those terms, but that certainly would put the kibosh on Europe and cause an enormous because once Ukraine's landlocked, Europe it's really and not allowed to bring wheat to the port out leading to the Black Sea. That's where the wheat has got to go, and that is going to really destabilize the European Union. Anyway,
I love that. This has been going on for weeks. I love that you touched on it. So let's go over to this topic for a second. That crudely translate to Putin sort out Ukraine, Brussels, and our leadership. And as you can see, it's got a Soviet flag. So not all of the polls are anti-Russia. Russia's the devil, as we've been presented. So I love that. But the first headline that came out from Zelensky, from an interview, saying, these Polish anti-Putin, whatever the bad words, they have to stop this because they are disrupting the flow of weapons. he didn't even mention grain, and they've emptied trains, not just trucks, but trains of grain just onto the rails and onto the streets. But his first response was, "You are disrupting the flow of weapons,"
because they're blocking the main arteries that are connecting the two borders, right? With these big, it looks like John Deere. It looks like they're getting a lot of John Deeres over there.
Yeah.
Now, would it be possible for Transnistria to be annexed, so to speak, or the Russian Federation might do it even without a land bridge? I mean, they could still do it without a land bridge, but I don't know. That might invite an attack. So I'm not sure if one would.
There's not really a point. There's not really a point right now.
I think Ian's right about that.
Let me bring in two pieces of news. There was two things that happened this week. One was a major oil refinery or fuel depot fire in Kharkov. Right, and Russians didn't take responsibility, and apparently it was partisan action. Basically like World War II, underground fighters on the side of Russia. And in Odessa, we also see like snow-covered cars, and people carve the word with their fingers onto it, Russia. But we're not talking about one; we're talking about 500 cars. So there's these underground, forces as well. And you don't need to, as Carlo said, you don't need to take Odessa at all. If you can just surround it and say, you're with us, who wants to leave leaves, done deal. And then you already have your land bridge to Transnistria. And what I want to emphasize is when you look at people at the Munich Security Conference and Washington, they all look, Stoltenberg always looks like he has to pee, but everybody else is like that. They're very nervous, they're fidgeting, it's very visible. And I want to ask Ian, did you see the recent longish interview? I've seen clips with Mr. Medvedev, the people's poet.
I have not, no.
Okay, now he made a couple of points saying, Odessa, come home. You're a Russian city, you're a historical Russian city, and maybe Kiev as well. The history is there, completely calm, completely, like that. He also mentioned, a couple of other things, but I want to focus on this. I mean, what is Russia doing at the meantime? Oh, quick question to the Americans. Did you have any issues with your cell phone coverage yesterday? No worries with the service?
Oh, I don't have a cell phone, so
okay. Like there was apparently like cellular service blackouts everywhere.
Yeah. I got some calls like I usually do, telemarketers.
Good old American.
It was certain. I think it was AT&T was the big one that was affected from a bad
I want to mention two things that are kind of.
I'll just give me two sentences. I'll finish this.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to insert the cell phone. It was just had to do with Mr. Putin went to Kazan, to a main factory where the Tupolev, the strategic 160 bombers are made, and he received 4 brand new shiny ones. And it's becoming a meme. He took a ride on one of them, a half-an-hour flight, and I thought maybe that has something to do with the U.S. cellular outage. Never mind. Then he landed, and he got word that Biden called him a son of a bitch. He did. And he said, well, that's very good and well. We still prefer him. You see, I was right, which is wonderful and diplomatic. And then he took another ride driving a Kamaz truck. Like it's becoming that website, Kim Jong-un looking at things. It's now Vladimir Putin driving things or flying things, which is what happened yesterday. And the main takeaway is they're just confident, smiling, radiating. It's like they've already won. That's what I see from the Russian side. Go ahead, Carlo.
Well, I just wanted to say that being being surrounded by ninnies here in the literary community that think that
we should have a
think
counter.
that they're intellectuals and who are don't know a goddamn thing about what they're talking about. I came across two gentlemen. One was a general, Harold Kuyat.
Great.
And Harold Kuyat,
ex-NATO general. Yeah.
Right, ex-NATO general, was saying that everything we've been saying about the history of the Ukraine war. It was a lovely paper he read. It was a little bit long, but it was enticing. So this is how idiotic the West is. General Kuyat reads this paper, very critical of the West and the United States for fomenting this war. Maidan, the Minsk Accords, Istanbul, the whole.
I saw a dubbed interview of this, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was great. And so what does the West do? They declare that this Harold Kuyat is an intimate of Putin's. He's in Putin's inner circle. Guess what this guy Kuyat is right now? He's a German general. There's no chance he's in Putin's intimate circle. You ninnies. And there's another ninnyhood that I've encountered. And let me read Alexander Chulia. Alexander Chulia was at the Istanbul Accords sessions, and he said that Putin was more than willing to sign on, that he was flexible and rational and willing to bring peace to the region. Guess what? Who? And once again, Julia has been slammed or ignored by the West. This he was a Ukrainian diplomat at these things. He was Ukrainian.
That's not Ilya Kiva, the one who got shot, like on Parliament stairs.
Right. And so, Paul, I know we don't reach a lot of ninnies. We don't have an audience of American ninnies. There's 330 million of them, and but I just wanted to point those two things out in case one or two ninnies, accidentally came upon this and still holds the stupid views. I'm basically angry with one particular ninny, so it's coming out, and I'm pissed off at all of them. I mean,
good. I like it when you're pissed off. I just
can't believe how stupid these people are.
I wanted to know who this was, so I looked it up. And the leader of the Servant of the People party, Zelensky's party in the Verkhovna Rada, in the Ukrainian parliament, is Olena Chuliak. So I'm thinking they might be related, because the other guy who was there was the speaker, David Arakamia, and he said the same. We opened champagne. We thought we're going to settle. We settled. He was so reasonable. It was basically a win. And Mr. Arestovich said the same. So this is all very highly confirmed. What you're saying.
Let me try and jump in and segue to something again I learned by reading Ben's
Boris Johnson.
Yes. So Tucker Carlson allegedly asked Boris Johnson for an interview, because when he interviewed Putin, Putin said Boris Johnson, intervened in those talks and told Ukraine not to finalize what they had agreed. And so, of course, Boris Johnson, we played a clip of that on our program where Boris was saying, that's just not true. Read the Telegram, read the Express, read the National
Daily
Enquirer.
Mail, the worst.
Yeah. So Tucker, being the journalist that he is, or maybe the self-promoter, but there's, you can do both. Yeah. He's like, okay, well, Boris, how about you sit down and we'll discuss this and tell us your side of the story. Tell us what happened. And Boris is all for it as long as he gets $1 million.
$1 million.
$1 million. That's such a wonderful. Yeah.
And he would probably fucking lie, that motherfucker. He wouldn't fucking tell the truth, that piece of shit. Sorry.
And just so you know, after that, after that, there was an article in The Guardian where Boris Johnson claimed that he withdrew. He didn't say that he didn't want $1 million. He said that part was true, but he withdrew from the interview with Tucker because Navalny's death. And Navalny and Navalnaya are just anchored into every story in the bloody world. Everything. It's like
about Navalny, I've been like probably many of you engaged in heavy conversations about the death.
What's it like? What's the perspective like
liberals,
in
right?
Brussels?
Walter, you know a lot of liberals, and
that's
so
what I wanted
that's why
to know.
you're engaged in these conversations, probably.
I know a lot of left-wingers and radical left-wingers, and
So-
3/4 of the left, what I call, people who know Assange and advocate his release.
What do they think?
3/4 are on board with Navalny, the Jesus being on the cross.
I was sick when I saw Stella Assange tweet that we can't save Navalny, the hero of Russia, but we can still save Assange. Like those two people in a single, and it was radio to hell saying, "How can you say that? Don't you know who this guy was?" But yeah, I'm not surprised that in Belgium most of the people went with it hook, line, and sinker. Right, the resistance leader, the anti-corruption guy. Yeah. That's the story in the West.
And the thing is, so, I spent hours and hours and hours explaining together with a couple of people, on my side. And then each time I try not to insult, but to give facts and to ask questions. And one by one, people drop off. One by one, people get insulting or leave the conversation.
Yeah.
If you point out facts.
It's the ostrich reflex.
Yeah. And of course, go live in Russia. If you would live in Russia, you will be in jail. I said, I don't think so. I think I would be quite all right. And then you point out the CPRF and Zhuganov, and you just show a graph on Wikipedia how the popularity of United Russia and the CPRF goes. So they're now on the rise.
They were about young people, about 20% the last, 19 point something the last election. Yeah, it's not defeating Putin, but it's a serious opposition party.
Yeah, it's about half of it of United Russia. You point out that Navalny is not known or not supported by most Russian people.
The same election, 1.9%. The party that Navalny was associated with, I forget the name.
Yeah, and I rarely watch television. But on television, it's, Navalny the hero on national television in Belgium. But they have to be a little bit accurate. And so they slide in, not all Russians know Navalny, so they're a little bit accurate.
You have to read to the end of the article, don't you? To find those. Yeah.
And when you see that there's a grain of truth in it, but it's so overwhelmed by pure propaganda, you can figure out why people are still on that emotional level with Navalny, the victim. And when the show was going on, we talked about religion and how people get stuck in religion. This new enlightenment thing, we the West, we're the best. We need to bring democracy to the world. This is the new religion. And this is, in fact, hardcore left-wing people. And Navalny is a Jesus on the cross.
Did anybody ever? I referenced this video where one of his main supporters or his right-hand man or his secretary was on video, negotiating to do a color revolution for a certain price. Does anybody know what I'm talking about yet?
Yeah,
I know the video. I know the video.
I should have done more research and brought it up for today's episode, but I know I saw it on Telegram. I'll bring it up on Tuesday. So what do we have here, Ben?
Oh shit! I wanted to show because the torchbearer. This is Navalny.
How is her hair?
I didn't know I was sharing, but snip picture. So like 1 week after her death, basically she was in the White House along with Daria Navalny, I think, their daughter. And yeah, part of it is this hysteria, this magic Jesus on the cross, as you said. They're naming the Human Rights and Sanctions Convention of the EU after Navalny. They're introducing new sanctions in the name of Navalny, both in the US and the EU. The UK has sanctioned the penal colony somewhere in north in Siberia. The people who work there, they've sanctioned them. It's sanction mania everywhere. In the meantime, and fortunately I don't have this on file, but it would be boring anyway because it's a longish video with subtitles, which I verified, from Navalny's mother, who went and tried to get, to visit the body. For 2 weeks, it's going to be under chemical analysis, but she still got to see the body. And she did this video. And she said, Navalny, this chick, this bitch, Yulia, you basically used my husband. You haven't seen him in 2 years. You actually convinced him to come back to Russia after the case in Germany. You wrote all the wealth to yourself. Basically, you've estranged his son from the daughter, basically. So, and I disallow you to use his name. I mean, whatever you think of Navalny, and I have very bad thoughts about him, this is a mother grieving for his son, and she's very hurt by this bitch smiling around with the EU foreign ministers, with the White House. And as you can see, we have a new guy. Oh, by the way, at the Munich conference, one of my favorite pictures, I don't have it on file, is her at the table with Tikhanovskaya, the Belarusian Guido,
failed presidential candidate. You can't string a sentence together. Yes, her.
Yes.
Who got cookies from Biden? She went and if you remember that interview, she went to, after she was chased out of Belarus, she had a meeting with Biden, and a reporter asked her what was good about the interview. Well, he had cookies. That was like the first words out of her mouth. We had cookies.
I thought that's the Nuland part. I thought Biden was famous for ice cream.
Well, Biden gave Tia cookies, and that like made her whole day. She was stoked about it when she left her meeting with us.
By the way, again, I don't have the clip, but after this, in the deep parking lot, Biden was asked for a quick word or two, and he already called her Yolanda. Yolanda Navalny.
It's a great song.
And asked the House to pass the aid to Ukraine. That was the interview.
Has anybody?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
We could ask Ian what it's like to live in Russia. He's an American living in Russia.
I do want to
How
mention.
come you're not in prison, Ian? How could that be?
Because we're on the front. I know, because I see all the scary stories. If you are a foreign citizen in Russia, they will send you to the front line as cannon fodder. I do want to mention, though, with Zelenskaya, it's kind of a farce because, Navalny was supposed to be this big, he's the opposition. He's Putin's opposition. That's how he's always marketed. Right. Yeah. And then he dies, and the person that the torch is passed to is his wife, which just means it was a farce. I mean, so you have in your organization that you supposedly have, you had no qualified people except your wife. I mean, it just kind of shows that wasn't a real organization. It was a brand. We're going to pass.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yes.
Very good point. And she could barely contain her enthusiasm. She's going to be the one to make the euros and the dollars now. She's the face.
Has anybody heard the take of Scott Ritter on it? Yesterday I saw an interview, Sabi Sabs, and
I wrote the first part. Apparently, he's in the middle, or already published the second part of a two-piece article set about the Navalny project, like deep MI6, deep CIA project. Yeah. And I've only read the first half, but looking forward to the second. Yeah, absolutely. I think verifiably true.
The baseline is it's MI6, CIA pushed Navalny back into Russia. You're going to be arrested for a couple of weeks and going to be released. Of course, they knew better, so he was in prison. And the kind of approaches, we get rid of this guy. If he goes to prison and does along our lines, we're going to treat his family well. And, Scott Ritter refers to the mafia movies. And
he does.
The thesis of Scott is he is overdosed himself on whatever kind of thing, or gets something to commit suicide. So that's it.
Well, apparently you don't read the British tabloids because it was a 5-finger palm exploding heart technique that we've seen in Kill Bill, like a signature KGB punch to the heart. I've seen it in 5 places now, including now the MSM, which is ridiculous to me. But one thing, and this was in the last cheat sheet, but we didn't bring it up, is apparently Germany And Washington were in talks of a prisoner exchange for the guy who killed like this war criminal from the Chechen war, Georgian origin, in Germany, in exchange for him. Like, why would Putin want to take him out now? Pretty much everything's going his way, but then suddenly this happens. I mean, as I said, the chemical examination is going to last like a fortnight. We'll see.
The only thing I read about Navalny was kind of suggesting that he really had the integrity of his convictions, because he did willingly go back to Russia knowing he was going to go to prison. So what I read, whoever the author was kind of praising him. But you might be absolutely right. It could have been he was convinced to do it by the CIA, by MI6, with the promises that, oh, don't worry, it'll be a few weeks. We'll spring you. And it'll be awesome. You'll be a celebrity. Everybody's going to know about you, and we'll have you replacing Putin in no time. Who knows how that worked out? But I don't think he was suicidal. I don't think he offed himself. I think maybe the West thought he was more valuable to them being dead than he was alive. But it's all speculation.
This is a speculation warning. If Germany and Washington were engaged in something, I always see London in that. I always do.
MI6, absolutely. I think that it wouldn't be convincing him. I think MI6 and the CIA probably had something on him and were extorting him to go back. And I mean, either you go back or we let this out to the public and you're toast, because he was inconsequential in Russia. Putin should have seen Navalny as an asset and taken more care in keeping him alive.
That's true.
I mean, here we have Julian Assange in Britain, and we have Mumia here, and we have Leonard Peltier here, and Harvey Arden, who visited Peltier on a regular basis, came into my store. We became friends, and he would give me updates on Peltier. And Peltier had a jaw abscess, and you would know about this, Billy Buck. A painful jaw abscess.
He did, Christy.
Deep infection, and they wouldn't treat him. So it's like these guys are under constant torture. But they're kept alive. They're kept alive just enough so that they can be used as political footballs, and that's part of the plan. Yeah. And
Jamal as well. He has got serious health issues. Get just enough medical treatment not to die, but to suffer.
Prison healthcare not the best. We'll leave it at that. But
don't you know that everybody in Russian crosshairs dies? I mean, what the news headlines tell us is there was this ballerina who Russia is now arrested, there was the defecting Maxim Kuzminov who stole a helicopter and killed 2 of his flight crew while defecting to Ukraine. They got him in Spain. So I'm just surprised that Ian's alive at this point.
Right. Well, we have another political prisoner. We got
you wrote about her recently, Ian. Please,
Ksenia.
We will plug your post at readingjunkie.com. So your most recent piece, tell us about the ballerina lady.
Yes. Let
me go with this image here.
Yes. So Ksenia Karolina was this girl from California who's a dual citizen who came back to Russia, and she was arrested, and there were all these sad stories about her in the Western press. Oh, she was just, she's just poor girl who was arrested. If you read the
$51.
Yes, because she had donated $51 to a what CNN called a Ukrainian charity. That was the reason she was arrested. There were some things they had her boyfriend or whatever up on an interview. He's like, oh, she was not a political person. She didn't think about, she was just proud to be a Russian and all that. Well, if you bring this up, there's a photo if you scroll down.
Okay.
Sorry. I switched over to the fundraiser that we were getting to. I can get back to.
Well, this is, yes, if you scroll down, So that's the photo all the news stories ran with. But if you scroll down, here's another photo I found on the Soliev channel. So this is the not political person, by the way.
And by the way, when you
political.
say ballerina, she was a dancer
Amateur,
in Los Angeles, so do the math.
Well, I wasn't going to go that far, but you never know.
I did.
But the website, if you go to the other tab, you'll see that Ukrainian charity she donated to. So this is the Ukrainian charity, they call it. And if you scroll down, you can see what they're raising money for. Drones and first aid kits. And you can see, just to be absolutely clear, they even specify on the website, this is stuff for Ukrainian soldiers.
This is military.
Just to eliminate any trace of a doubt.
Where do they get that $51 figure? Because that sounds like a little bit of dishonesty.
Well, so they found, we don't know because they did. So what also Western news stories leave out is that she was initially arrested for a minor charge for hooliganism. She came to Russia. Go ahead.
Bullshit because they found an employer who came up with that $51 like online transaction. That's where that comes from. So it's just they found a dupe.
Yeah, so pretty much it's like, so this is and if they did, maybe they did find the bank charge for $51, for example. It doesn't mean that's all she donated.
Of course not. And the FSB
that's just what they found.
To add context, the FSB is investigating for donations going back to February 2022. Yes. So it's not a one-time thing.
Yes, and that's the thing too. They don't. If she's using Western bank accounts, it might be hard for the FSB to trace. That might just be the charge they found. And and guess what? What do you think would happen to an American citizen who is caught donating any amount of money? It doesn't even matter how much it was to Al Qaeda or Hezbollah or ISIS. I mean, let's be realistic here. Do you think you can donate money to ISIS and not get in trouble? Or Osama bin Laden, PayPal Osama bin Laden, it's just like, and you're not.
Well, not just that. An enemy that the USA is actively fighting because that's what Russia is involved in.
Well, that's the point. It's not just a group that that's controversial. It's like ISIS. It's an actual group that country is actively at war with, because ISIS is an entity that the USA is at war with. It's on
on paper,
the list. I mean, it's important because, from the Russian perspective, they are actively engaged in hostilities. And this is stuff that will be directly used against Russian soldiers. So that meets all the criteria for treason.
Well, you could donate to Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen when they were fighting the Russians in Afghanistan. And you could do it through Charlie Wilson, who was a U.S. senator at the time.
Can I add, that was the one
Charlie
Tom
Wilson's
Hanks Tom Hanks movie that I hated. Yes, the Charlie Wilson's
war.
He was
terrible.
Thank you.
The
production value wasn't even that good. It was just such a crappy movie in general. Just pure
I didn't even
lazy. Oh, I didn't see that.
I got so outraged.
But these stories are designed to, make liberals hate Putin even more. And liberals don't even think to themselves, I mean, if I did that in this country, the same thing would happen to me. That doesn't even enter their consciousness because they're liberals. They don't know any better.
Well, it's funny. If you read the stories about Navalny or this girl being arrested, you'll notice how they all try to tie it to Tucker Carlson. Like every one of those stories will be like, oh, well, and then when Tucker Carlson talked to Putin, and that's what they're trying to do with her arrest. You mentioned the possibility of prisoner exchanges. So they're like trying to use weasel words to tie it in to Tucker without directly saying it in a way that he could sue them. They're just carefully kind of imply, because he could, I'm sure if someone directly accused him of that, he could sue them and he'd be completely right to, but they say it in an indirect way.
See how diligently they're ignoring the context, the history.
And that's the artistry of journalism.
Putin was elaborating in their arguments against Putin and Carlson. I wanted to just say, a friend of the show, Scott Ritter, he summed up his view of Navalny by saying, "Good riddance." That's what he said. Good riddance. So he has no love for Navalny. And
it's the same thing. You remember that clip where a Nazi got punched somewhere in New York City?
I remember this Richard Spencer punch, I think. I don't know who.
It was a similar debate, Yes, he's a Nazi, but you don't punch him on the left. And then, the real radical left-wing people, it's like, who you're defending over here? So, and it gives it's heated discussions, but it gives a good watershed line. It's very clear who stands on which side when, tension is going on, and you have to pick a side. And then you see a lot of left-wingers, liberal left-wingers, who are, as I said, on many issues very correct, and then they flip over. And you get this emotional layer that comes over the rational layer. Just like, bang, there it is.
Yeah.
On the topic of soft power, yesterday I saw a couple of minutes of Jon Stewart.
Jesus, you watched that too? I'm sorry, I did too, and it was
cringe.
His rebuttal.
I would use the word cringe, which I don't like, but yeah, that was absolute cringe.
And the level
you're talking about just because we're talking about the same movie, you're talking about his rebuttal to Tucker Carlson.
To Tucker about the metro, they're not built with freedom. That one, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking go ahead.
It's a trade-off for freedom. And what you don't understand, you're not free. You're in Hungary.
It's an autocratic state.
Our metros look nicer than the ones.
Yeah. And the interesting part of this, Jon Stewart used to be funny, but he's on a technical level, he used to be funny, but he's all using his old tricks, but then like with half the power, with half the punchline, it's not made well. Like the Tom Hanks movie you referred to, it's not made well. They used to make good movies. I mean, that if you were unpoliticized, you look at it, it's like, great movie, Top Gun. You're lifted up together with, you fantasize. I'm going to be a fighter pilot when I grow up and all that stuff. But
Castaway. Anyway, sorry.
The quality of their productions is not there yet anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's that the CIA is sitting in on every script. Every script. It's literally true. It's literally true. If Hollywood has changed. One example, Howard Norman, the novelist, was another one of my customers, and we became friends. He's a great guy. And he sent the script to Hollywood, and the producer sent it back, and scribbled on the top was, "More fucking Howard." So they were concerned much more about,
more cowbell.
More fucking. I think that's so funny. I had to tell it, even though it's not relevant to anything. But now I hear from people that, yes, I think John Stepling could speak to this, that a friend of the show, that yes, the CIA and the government at large is in on all of these scripts, the Hurt Locker, all these, the Sniper movie, all that stuff. They're in on it, and you can't deviate. They'll nail you. And Hollywood is afraid. They're frightened.
I know you don't always support, but Jimmy Dore said he used to have brave writers, and I think that means the writers were more free. Basically, they have just curbed the freedom, and that's why it's not funny. It's not factual. I watched a brand new movie called The International Space Station, ISS or something. Guess what the plot is? There's Russians and there's American. Yeah. You've seen them too. There's Russian and there's Russian and American astronauts up there, and nuclear war down there. They have to kill each other. That's the plot. So
I want to say that Stewart and what's the other guy?
Colbert, the French
Colbert.
I was thinking of Colbert as well.
Yes, he used to be. I mean, they used to be very fight back in the early 2000s and mid 2000s when they were making fun of neocons and these hardcore evangelical Christians who are all about invading Iraq, all these pro-war crazy people when they were making fun of them. But I think I know the exact points they stopped being funny. It was when Obama became president. That was the exact moment.
You're right.
They stopped being funny because you cannot make fun of someone for being pro-war when you're pro-war. So they just couldn't, whether or not there was a CIA. I'm sure. I mean, I think that's true. But it was even less to do with the Pentagon guy who's approving the script. It's more to do with just the fact they just can't make fun of themselves. They're too, Obama really was like to have that only Nixon can go to China effect. He eliminated the mainstream anti-war left. He destroyed it.
Do you know what? Well, to tie it up with the previous story, but go ahead,
back to the Stewart thing. I'm sorry. Go back to the Stewart thing. all he was saying was, you're free to live on the streets in America. It was like, you're free to not have health care in America. You're all these things.
You don't like freedom,
free.
Carlo? You oppose freedom.
Yeah, I oppose freedom. You're free to have your children go hungry in
You're
America.
one of those MAGA Putinists.
It was just, that's what I took away from it. And maybe I took it away from it because my wife and I had just watched the umpteenth YouTube video on homelessness in America. My God. It was Los Angeles. It was bad.
Hundreds of thousands of them.
And when I was up, last time I was in New York, it was wall to wall homelessness. Everywhere I went.
Kind of bad exponentially after COVID.
Yeah, I can't play with my pen as well as John Stewart can. He had years of experience. I tried. But I wanted to link it back to how bad the propaganda is. I don't know where I read this. One of the mainstream Washington Post, New York Times, those guys, they uncovered that one of the last letters that Navalny ever sent was, look, Trump's campaign looks really, really dangerous. I think it ended with the words, never Trump, riding with Biden, Wakanda forever, or something. That's how pathetic it is. Navalny's death, suddenly it's an electoral issue, and it's against, it's riding with Biden, who recently got on. Air Force One is the plane, Marine One is the helicopter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen him and Nancy Pelosi? I don't know which one's older, like inching toward like two very aged robots.
There was a big news story. It was reported. I read the Daily Mail article about it. That talking about Biden's day. Excuse me.
Biden's day. Is that?
Yes, he wakes up. Well, like it describes his day. Like he wakes up. His cat wakes him up. That's an actual line in it. He doesn't have an alarm clock. His cat wakes him up. He has a meeting with his physical therapist every day to help him walk. It's literally he needs walking lessons to not fall.
While Captain,
at that age.
His rabbit dog bites 3 aides.
What else happens in day? So I guess his dog did bite some people, but that's not a daily occurrence, Ben. We're talking about the daily routine.
Yes, and apparently his work day starts at 10 a.m. and then ends at 5 p.m. So it's basically like 6 hours of work a day, if that.
The British press ran this, like the bubble in the White House, the like protected lifestyle, stuff like that, exactly describing his day. But that dog bit like 7 aides. That's why I said that.
And his staff are apparently it's a daily occurrence. They're just terrified that something's going to happen to him because he's just that feeble. Imagine being on his staff, having to watch him just wobble around all day, just being terrified that he's just going to, just die on the spot one day. And it's just imagine the mess that would.
But then all of Kamala's staff is waiting in anticipation. They can't wait.
Oh, I don't think her staff likes her too much. I
Maybe
think
not.
I think that'd be a disaster. But yes.
I
can illustrate.
And the people really in control are not that intelligent or polished. I mean, the Blinken crew is pretty lame. They're no match for a lot of people in the world.
Agreed. Agreed, Carlo.
Well, anyway.
I kind of liked the first video. This was Vladimir Putin ascending into the Tupolev 160, the strategic bomber. And I thought, well, someone should do it side by side. Within like 6 hours, this meme existed. Just a little fun, Different.
But it symbolizes the greater picture of everything, The hegemon is shrinking and falling apart, and the runner-up it's not even the runner-up, it's multipolarity that actually, keeps people in good physical shape, but also, mental shape.
It's a perfect illustration of everything, isn't it? Yeah. The shift of the poles of power. I wanted to talk, you mentioned Mr. Blinken, all right? Anthony is how they call him. Because he's not Anthony.
My relatives would say, Anthony.
Yeah, he flew
Get out of the pasta.
He flew to Munich, right? The security conference, and he had a very tough meeting with Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister. Then Sullivan flew, basically hijacked the meetings, I think, in Thailand, where had a meeting with Lavrov, who then flew to Brazil, where Blinken's now. Anyway, and after that, the US is now basically doing the whole bravado thing, the show of force, because the latest I read, there's 5 aircraft carriers heading into the South China Seas while everything is going on. You know, one is there. I don't know. That's most of the fleet in my memory. And that's a bluff that China's going to call. Like, why do you send this shit here? But just imagine absolute humiliation in Ukraine, which cannot be avoided, I think, at this point, at any time in the future, being shown up by the Johnny Houthi in the Red Sea and by Hamas in Gaza. And you still do this. It's like their reflex. No diplomacy, no get along with enemies. Let's send 5 aircraft carriers. Look how good that looks on the headlines. That's what these people do. And that's how this thing is crumbling. Like it's accelerating, if anything.
So I didn't hear, and I don't remember reading it in your weekly rundown that there was allegedly 5 aircraft carriers headed over to the South China Sea.
It was in Tuesday's one, but on Tuesday we focused pretty much on the Trump phenomenon.
No, that's a very interesting development, and so you're definitely right to point that out. I mean, yeah, what exactly is all that about?
It's what they know. It's what they know. Look, people should look at these things and be afraid, and then we get our way. Sorry, go ahead, Carlo.
And it appeals to a domestic audience. I think it's a campaign sort of thing. I wanted to point out, I'm surprised that Nancy Pelosi isn't running for president, because as Ben pointed out in his cheat sheet, she declared that there are no U.S. weapons being used by the Ukrainians by the Israelis in Gaza. There are no U.S. weapons being used by the Israelis in Gaza.
Because we give Israel the money and then they buy them from us. So then they are their weapons.
Yeah.
That's called property.
Thank you for clarifying.
Right.
Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. I think the warships and all this has to do with domestic policy, which brings us to the point of, do they really fear Trump that much? I mean, and why? Please, somebody do what Billy Bob just clarified for me about the weapons.
I'd rather talk
because it's looking more and more like Trump is, positioned to be the next president. So it remains to be seen if they have a plan to not let that happen. I think if there's a free and fair election, that could quite possibly be the result.
They see, and I hate Marvel, so I'm sorry about this, but they see Thanos, I am inevitable. So we have to come up with a cunning time travel plan or something to just cut him under. I don't know. But, he's bad news for the world. He's bad news for you. I never said he wasn't. All I said was he's, a chaos bomb. He wants to 50-something% tariffs on all Chinese goods, which would be a catastrophic for you guys, especially. He also said, I don't know what, he didn't mention Ukraine, but he is absolutely Israel maniac. Like he would bulldoze everything. I can't recall the exact quote, but fool's eye on. So yeah, I'd rather talk about West Asia, but go ahead.
Let's ask Ian a personal question.
Go ahead.
Are you allowed to vote in the U.S. elections?
You know what? I haven't researched it because
That's a good question.
It's a good question. I mean, when I've been overseas before, voting was an option. Maybe it's possible to do it through the embassy. I have not looked into it. I don't really plan
And then the follow-up, of course, is if you were forced to vote between Uncle Joe and Trump, where would you?
Oh, Trump, absolutely. I mean, it's not even. Biden's a mental vegetable. I mean.
If I had to, I would do the same thing if I had to. I'm not going to because neither one deserves my vote. And, the whole system isn't deserving of my vote.
Well,
look, let's do the round thing. I would vote for Trump because I'm European and that guy, chaos bomb, good news for Europe. Wouter?
He would accelerate things, and there's a slight chance that he might open up a door for some kind of negotiation sooner than anybody else, but I don't know.
Yeah, he's not a good person. That's not what we're saying. If you had to vote,
strategically you do that. It would be it would feel uncomfortable, but we get the same thing here.
Carlo, you get the last.
We get the same thing here in for example,
my fingers off with garden shears before I voted for either one of those fuckers.
Understood. Wouter, I think you had a new topic in mind. I hear that your previously longest serving prime minister, which is Mark Rutte, has been propped up by the US, Germany, and France to be the new NATO guy. What about Mr. the funny guy, Wilders?
Geert Wilders. Now, I live in Belgium, so it's right next to the Netherlands.
Oh, fuck. I screwed that up. It's the Benelux.
No, that's no problem. Rutte is perfect for leading NATO. He is very flexible.
And challenging Russia. I mean, that was the Western headline. Yeah. He should lead NATO and challenge Russia. Like they go together.
And he's very good at surviving crises and scandals. He's amazing for the job, so it does not surprise me. We have delivered in Belgium a couple of NATO leaders and EU leaders because Belgian politicians are very flexible because we have two language communities, and they're much more subtle, and they can flip-flop, much readily, but they're too nuanced, so they go for Rutte. About Geert Wilders, well, I had a discussion on the left, and I said, Geert Wilders is trying to do the protectionist, isolationist thing. Like, we don't care about Ukraine. We got to fix our own problems. We got to pay nurses better. We got to raise the minimal level of income.
And destroy Gaza. I know he's in that. He's in that camp. Oh, yeah. He's high Zion. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But these leftist things, right-wing and extreme right-wing politicians, of course, slide it in, to sweeten the pill. But there is no discussion about it. And of course, when I have a discussion like that, I say, this is great for peace. Geert Wilders is great for peace. If Ukraine is, calmed down.
He's the same as Orban was for Hungary, and I don't regret voting for him. He's right-wing. But Ursula von der Leyen recently, she's announced that she's going to be the second term. I'll leave Europe alone after this, I promise. But she, made headlines that she will not work with right-wing parties. But if you read the article, it doesn't say right-wing anywhere. What it says is anti-EU, anti-NATO. So I guess we've learned that Sarah Wagenknecht, Union, the new absolute left party, which is anti-NATO, anti-EU, anti-US, I guess they're far right now too. I guess. Yeah. But based on Ursula's pronunciations, everybody is. I guess Robert Fico is.
The Sarah Wagenknecht party is something to really pay close attention to.
They're my greatest hope for Germany at the moment.
I think Leo is also working a little bit for them.
Yes, he mentioned.
And he had good comments on, what's discussed inside, that there is really, radical left-wingers behind the scenes. And I'm trying to figure out whether I join the Workers' Party in Belgium, because I'm partyless, but they're kind of on the same side as Sarah Wagenknecht and Dag Dillon.
Oh, the Turkish, she's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is interesting, I'm into a reading group of Prashad. So we get together every month, and the guy who organizes it, he is somewhat a political ideologue in the Workers' Party, the left-wing, the proper left-wing party in Belgium that gets 10% of the votes. And Prashad is pro-USSR and pro-Russia. Prashad is one of the few left-wing thinkers that said Russia has to defend itself. Any country defends itself. And the leader of the Workers' Party, Peter Mertens, he is not. He is like, we have to condemn the invasion. But both of them are quite close. They do interviews. They meet each other a couple of times a year. So Prashad is influencing this Workers' Party in Belgium, which is the only opposition party. The rest is pro-capitalist, pro-Ukraine. You got on the right, skillful politicians who want to recuperate the anti-war movement and anti-Russia movement, and then you get a whole woke discussion. But they're not very consequential. On Israel, they're not on the side of the Gazans. So
I haven't seen, other than Spain, any European country on the side of Gazans, which really is scary to me. Maybe Ireland to a little.
Belgium a little bit because Belgium chipped in more money into UNRWA.
Yes.
So
island.
this is typical Belgian. Okay, we sent a ship against the Yemen people. It's some kind of cruiser, whatever. It's a small ship. It does not. It will not tip the balance. But we're gonna help the Gazans, and this is particularly interesting because of the Workers' Party giving real good opposition, years long, and are on the side of the Palestinians. And the next election is coming up in a few months. I don't know exactly. Here in Belgium, we see that they gain more voters from the immigration part of the population, from the Muslims, because they have a very consistent pro-Palestinian stance. And that, of course, influences mainstream politicians, and they think like, we have to do that. We have to support the Palestinians too. Otherwise, those left-wingers, they get 15%, 20% of the vote next time.
True. So, I'd say that if you look at the huge protests in most European capitals, it's like there's a huge disconnect between our leaders who are Zionists and the majority of the populations who have just seen through this is just too much slaughter. And I want to talk about West Asia, if you're okay with a short clip. As we last time had the meeting on Tuesday, there was this big ICJ hearing with 52 countries presenting evidence about the occupation, the illegal occupation of Palestine. Palestine's in the US. And this was what the Chinese representative, who I unfortunately don't have the name of, said in English. I'll just make sure that I have the sound on. Have a listen. It's just 55 seconds.
The Palestinian people fight against Israeli oppression, and their struggle for completing establishment of an independent state on the occupied territory are essentially just actions for restoring the legitimate rights. Numerous other resolutions recognize legitimacy of struggling by all available means, including armed struggle by peoples under colonial domination or foreign occupation. For instance, the UNGA Resolution 3070 of 1973, I quote, reaffirms the legitimacy of the people's struggle for liberation from colonial and foreign domination and the alien subjugation by all available means, including armed struggle, end of quote.
That's from The Cradle, who did a good edit, because it was like half an hour long. But, I mean, this to me looks, I know I hate it because it's overused. That is a real game changer because it's a big power, lots of friends, taken seriously. Of course, security, UN Security Council member making a stand, like an absolute stand. What do you guys think? The ICJ. Go ahead, Billy Bob.
Well, I think I may have inadvertently moved some people around on the screen. I'm sorry about that. But no, I mean, those are good words. I mean, it's definitely true. And, we've heard them before. Of course, the Palestinians have the right to resist their occupation. So it's good that they're, daring, I guess, to be more outspoken on the issue. The problem is that the United States has a veto in the Security Council. And, what people say really doesn't matter because every year it's the United States and Israel against the entire General Assembly on this, on affirming the peaceful resolution to the question of Palestine. So,
there's global outreach. They just did the veto a third time, the Algerian, just as
And allegedly they're threatening to bring their own. The United States is threatening to bring their own ceasefire to the Security Council. I'm not sure what they're waiting for and why they keep vetoing other people's ceasefires. Well, I do know, it's because they are totally on board with the genocide. So it's
they're doing the puppet, the good cop, bad cop, because Netanyahu already rejected it out of hand, saying the US shouldn't do this, and already have like a day after tomorrow a post-war plan for Gaza, and it will be under Israeli rule, no Palestinian rule whatsoever. That came out today.
Did we mention that?
Interesting to see is if they try and kick everybody out of Gaza? Like, I mean, are they really going to go for ethnic cleansing, just cordon off parts of Gaza? Are they really going to put settler, villas on the Gazan coast? Like, is the world going to tolerate that? Because I think that's the desire. Like, that's the future goal. Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, obviously includes Gaza, includes the West Bank, includes part of Syria, part of Egypt.
I think
the world, I don't think will tolerate the bloodshed or the ethnic cleansing, but the IMF, meaning the US, is in talks with Egypt. We will support you through the strain of new immigrants, and they're talking about the Gazans, absolutely, which is horrific. Just go ahead, Ian.
I think it's very much. I do think that's Israel's plan. It's very much a repeat of what Nazi Germany did. They need living space. Lebensraum. They need that living space. Yes, and I think it's as long, and they will go however far they can as long as the USA supports it. Yeah. USA is Greater Israel. It's their lifeline. As long as I'm disappointed, looking back at what I was thinking in October, I'm disappointed that, that all of the Arab states basically rolled over for Israel. That is disappointing. I mean, I guess in hindsight, not surprising, but the big thing is that the USA continues to give unlimited funds and unlimited weapons and munitions. Because at this point, it's very clear the IDF is not effective. They're militarily incompetent. I mean, it's a pretty staggering display of cowardice and incompetence. They're unable to fight basically teenagers with homemade rockets, basically. And they've
definitely lost the public opinion war. Absolutely lost it.
But the public opinion war, frankly, doesn't matter as long as the USA gives them whatever they want, honestly.
There's another thing. In Africa, there is a big organization that joins African countries, and Israel is permanently banned from that. I don't know the name exactly.
Yeah, the African Union, you're right. Yeah. They permanently banned them, not even a full member, just like they had observer status or something. Yeah. And they also basically... they condemned Israel over the Gaza and called for immediate ceasefire. And also it's not the Islamic Cooperation, the Arab League. Like they designated 60 Israeli organizations as terrorists. So even though, like, I think Jordan and Saudi Arabia are sort of going around the Houthi blockade and doing land corridors to keep Israel alive, which is horrible. Even Turkey is supplying them with gas. And there are opposition members in Turkey who are saying, you, Erdogan, will be remembered for financing this horrible genocide. So there's real uproar against them. It looks like... go ahead, Carlo.
I'm sorry. I'd like to make 2 points. Go. First of all, we never consider, and this is not just us. This is the whole, everybody I'm watching, everybody I'm reading. There's very little consideration or talk about the huge oil fields in the Mediterranean off the shore of Gaza and the building of the canal. But I want to make one other point before I open this up for further discussion. That is, there's the states like Saudi Arabia and Turkey especially, they're outwardly, they're like a lot like the U.S. They're outwardly condemning Hamas, but internally they have to be careful because they have enormous economic ties with Israel. All of those countries in the region actually have enormous agreements for energy and food and all kinds of goods. So they don't want, and that would have an adverse effect on the economy if they actually severed ties with Israel at an economic level. So it's just been all talk. People go, why hasn't Hezbollah gone in? Well, obviously, they don't want Beirut to be, laid in ruins again. But other places, other countries are just posturing. And one other thing, the IMF offering money to Egypt, that's a death knell for Egypt to the economy. I wouldn't take IMF money if I was starving.
Egypt is the second greatest beneficiary of U.S. foreign aid. So basically, we own
After
Egypt,
Israel.
we own the government, we own the military.
Yeah.
So the people don't have any sovereignty. We own them just like we own Israel. But Egypt is, yeah.
African countries now have a choice. They can pivot to China, so to speak. And that has not been the case since the USSR. And I think USSR could not even do so much as China is doing right now. So it's a more of a mid-long perspective. They're not going to flip-flop right now. They're going to try to play both sides and be on the Israel and US side because, as you said, Carlo, there's money to be made for that. But that, of course, makes Israel very fragile because if those African countries will switch to good deals with China, and we know where China is at this topic right now very clearly, then they say, maybe we could sanction Israel. We could just not deliver. Not even sanctions, just, we're not going to sell this and we're going to sell it to China or whatever. So Israel is very fragile.
Yeah, talking out of both sides of their mouth. But right now, there's an alternative. And you mentioned China with the economic ties in Africa. And the public opinion in Africa about Russia is just, unequivocally support. And Iran did, I think China and Russia through Iran did the impossible because Scott Ritter described like this Shia crescent, which was supposed to be against the Sunnis and they fight amongst each other. And they started doing negotiation, Syria and Turkey peace, Yemen and Saudi Arabia getting into peace talks. They're still in the middle of this. Yeah. And at this point, because of this bloodshed in Gaza, we might be heading for, the new BRICS countries, as in the poles of Russia, China, perhaps India, but definitely Iran, and all the Arab world could be on their side within 5 years, and I don't see that reversing, anytime soon. And just shout out to the Houthis because they just captured a high-tech submarine drone after they didn't sink, but they almost destroyed a UK oil cargo ship, which the BBC ran. Look, it hasn't sunk yet. We've towed it to shore. It's just a scratch. Typical British.
It's just a scratch. Monty Python. Yes.
Monty Python. Yeah. And also attacked American destroyers and another bulk cargo ship, and they don't give a hoot about any of this. Absolutely, shout out to them, and you can't go around them. And I love that Operation Prosperity Guardian is now 2 months old, I think. And now Europe is going to take that over with Espides, which I think means shield in Greek, their operation with their little navy. And here I just wanted to make a point which I think will give everyone a laugh. After, Britain couldn't two of their, I think, frigates in the port of Djibouti collapsed into each other. Then 2 aircraft carriers, identical, couldn't show up to sail. And now they did their second Trident, which is their nuclear deterrent test, in 8 years. And this is how it ended. We don't need sound. I mean, there isn't any sound. That's the Trident. That's the nuclear deterrent. And how it was described was it fell yards. Now, a yard is 90 centimeters. That's about it. Less than a meter. So this could have killed Grant Shapps, the defense minister.
You don't know that's not what it was supposed to do.
It was supposed to do that. That's
supposed to do the loop-de-loop
thing.
A loop-de-loop.
Okay. So these guys are going to go to war against the Houthis, and we're, I think, better world ahead.
I watched a talk by the Houthi. What do you call him? Not
the
spokesperson. Spokesperson, brilliant, and he stressed over and over again the moral position that they're taking. They're doing this to try to stop the genocide in Gaza. That's it. Yeah. And he had
from day one
clear, concise answers for the questioner. It was inspiring. I was
bona fide fucking hero nation, and I love that he's called Yahya Sarri, like the spokesperson, and you can see photos of him just hitching a ride on the back seat of a scooter because all the people just surround him and love him. He just walks freely on the street. He's not like in a bunker. He's just That's
Yeah.
Yemen.
I
guys.
want to get Ian's opinion, but I wanted to kind of summarize. Well, you don't have to give your opinion, but I want to summarize a few things. So we talked about, Odessa, Transnistria, the land bridge connecting, and we're speculating on, is that going to happen? And then we're speculating in Israel. Is there going to be a war with Hezbollah? Is Iran going to get involved? Is it going to spiral? And all of these factors they haven't been decided yet. Nobody knows. We're waiting on it's the West. The West is going to determine how these events play out. And nobody knows. It's not like this is a future written in stone.
No, Billy Bob, we have what the leaders said, and that doesn't usually mean a hell of a lot. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a two-part question. So I think in the Middle East, it's very clear the USA does not want escalation. And with Israel, it's very much a tail wagging the dog. I think, it's come up on the show before. Biden, I think actually when Goldstein was out here a little while ago, I like the way he said it, because it's just that, Biden does have the leverage because we're like Ukraine 100% supporting the Israeli economy and war machine. But for whatever reason or combination of reasons, the USA does not know how to leverage that. They don't have solutions. So I think that's my answer to the Middle East portion of the question. As far as Ukraine, Ben, maybe you know this. There was a Ukrainian official who was interviewed recently. I think he was with Azov, who said that if Russia opened up a new front, Ukraine does not have the troops to stop it. I don't remember who that was.
I don't remember seeing this.
Yeah, so basically, at this point, I think it's accurate to say if Russia opens up another front in Kharkov or from Belarus, Ukraine couldn't stop it. Though it doesn't mean that's going to happen, because if Russia just keeps pressing on the existing fronts, that could just resolve the war also. So I think unless the USA escalates what they're giving, and even like attack hymns are just, the problem with attack hymns is, yes, they're annoying, they're a threat, they can strike deep in Russian territory. The problem is we have very few of them. So it's like, is it worth having that escalation for something that Ukraine's only going to be able to use a few times? Well,
just to add, the 300-kilometer variant is what they're talking about.
The 300 to 5, it's a little, it depends on the variant, and the actual true maximum range is generally not publicized, but it's a very long range variant that can be fired from the HIMARS platform. But there just aren't many, and there have never been many of them. That's the problem with handing over that munition. It's something that's crossing a red line for Russia, and there's very little benefit to it.
Yeah.
So
even Jan Stoltenberg, that piece of Norwegian wood at the head of NATO, said that Ukraine has the right to strike Russian targets. I don't know, Kremlin, whatever he has in his mind, but that's insane. When you crumble, that's not what you do. But
yeah, so
I just want to back up a bit to talk about Ukraine too.
Okay.
One of the things that General Harold Kuyat pointed out was that that Putin wanted to join NATO, and that there was something called the NATO Russian Founding Act and the NATO Russian Council, and he pointed out that Russia was rebuffed at all points when they were promised vaguely that they could join NATO, but they were rebuffed at all points at limited participation in NATO, and so and then finally nothing, and just to keep them an adversary. And it's got to be understood by people who are not watching this stream or any other stream like it, that it's been the West that has tried to isolate Russia and keep it, like as one person recently put it, and I thought it many times, to keep it as though were still the Soviet Union. There was still there was still a kind of ideological dimension between the two, when Russia is really a capitalist country now. It's and it's
Putin said we're as bourgeois as you are, except their economy is slightly different.
Not really, because the CPRF has 20% of the voters consistently over the many years, meaning that it's the last standing communist party in Europe. And the fact that the CFRF called for an operation, special military operation, way before it happened.
For 8 years, they were adamant, yes.
Yeah. Second largest party in Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of remnant laws and attitudes of the USSR, as well as sentiments. When there's a victory, the hammer and sickle is waved. So that can.
There's a lot of them in Ukraine too.
Yeah.
The red flags with the hammer and sickle.
When the Russians come and liberate cities, then those pop up back again.
It's the victory flag, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
And Russia, Putin is a pragmatist. He looks at the left. He looks at the right. He does not look at the extreme right. The Nazis. He's adamantly, he's fiercely against them, of course. But the radical left, he is at least tolerating. And this is a point I wanted to make when we were talking about U.S. politics. In U.S. politics, they don't allow dissent voices, even indoors. If you want to be a strong, resilient political project, you invite people like Scott Ritter as, how do you say that when you train for boxing, a sparring partner? You allow those people in. Yeah. People who have lots of knowledge, lots of experience.
If you're serious about a free press, you do.
Yeah, it's not even free press.
Or a political project. Yeah.
Keeping them indoors and have serious discussions behind screens, so you know more. And Putin is doing that with the CPRF. He says, this is healthy opposition. We need that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because a part of the population is on their side, and I want to have all the population behind me. And the Statista and the Gallup researches, the studies show that he has plus 80% of the people backing him up. You cannot have that if all the CPRF people are feeling like standing in the cold. Then you don't have that. So he is adopting parts of the communist era, the Communist Party, into his policy. So that's the nuance. Yeah.
I'm with you, and I'd like to add to that. If you look at an economy, you look at what do the national resources serve, and obviously they are state-owned. Gazprom, Rosneft, the big mining companies, they're all nationally owned. Now you see what happens. They have been reformed since 2022, but the defense industry, it's not there to make a profit. It said, this is what we need for defense. We need many of this. We need many of this. It's forget profit. And of course, now there's the pro-family movements, not movements, laws. You get a free car, you get this, you get that. All of this are remnants that can't be taken away. And on that point, I'll translate. This is very short, 36 seconds. This is what, unfortunately, it hasn't existed for 35 years in my country, but it still exists in Russia. This is the campaign ad for one of the front runner for the KPRF. I'll translate the one sentence. This is the short version of it. This is a sentiment in Russia.
Yeah. That's powerful.
What he said was, we've played with capitalism enough now.
Yep.
And I think because of the 20%, it's a real sentiment in Russia. And what you described about Putin is what I really hated about him for many years, since 2000 until 2022, is he puts people at the table and he wants a consensus. He's not deal maker, a very good manager, Yeah. And Andrei Martyanov said this, I'll just put this out there, the three largest flags, I don't know if it's Moscow and St. Petersburg, Ian will know this, are side by side flowing in the wind in Russia. And one is the Imperial Russian flag, the second is the Soviet flag, and the third is the current tricolor of Russia. And what Putin did under 2 decades was weave them together into a single history so it doesn't tear people apart. I was at two hearts about that like 3 years ago. But now I'm beginning to understand, and I don't even resent like Orthodox Church coming into that in some sort of way. But I did like a couple of years ago. But what he did was, yeah, an amazing project of weaving these three different sentiments, like fights at the dinner table, together into one history united.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading Moon of Alabama, and
So do I.
especially enjoy reading their comments. And one
Yeah.
guy, he commented, actually there were two, and I stupidly printed out the same one twice instead of both of them. But he heads it, the U.S. is achieving its objectives in the Ukraine, and then he gives 10 points at which they're achieving their objectives. It's probably too long to read because we should almost hang it up. But what do you guys feel about that? How is the U.S. achieving its objectives in Ukraine or not?
Well, I'm curious to see where he's coming from. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think we talked to Dust on Tuesday, and he said, yeah, the military and industrial complexes profits are through the roof. So that's an objective they've achieved. But what else?
Yeah. They have split the EU from Russia to prevent a two-year
that they did.
We brought that up too on Tuesday.
Yeah, they have sold more LNG to Europe. We brought up that before.
They slaughtered Germany's economy, pretty much.
Yes, that's in here. And they are slaughtering Slavs. He's using the word slaughter. They are slaughtering Slavs and expending Russian weapons that could oppose NATO. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I agree with the assessment that I think Leon made, that they're going to actually have more firepower when the Russians going to have more firepower when this ends than when they did when they began.
Oh, for
I
sure.
think that's fairly obvious. But things like that, he's got 10 of them. So I just
is
thought
Spaz in agreement with any of that, Ian?
Yes, he is in full agreement. Actually, I put him in for a job at BBC. I think he'd be very qualified to go on camera and bark about Russia. It's actually kind of on par
He's
with...
better qualified than some BBC people.
Yes.
Hello, Spaz.
My favorite, to this day, my favorite Western news report about Russia was when Vykusna Tachka reopened.
The McDonald's.
And this guy, I think it was Business Insider, this guy went and did a video, and he was talking about, it was very funny because this meal looks literally the same as any other McDonald's meal. And he was talking about how bad it was. And at one point he said, even the fries are sadder. And that's an actual thing.
I remember that. Yeah,
yes.
Even the fries are sad.
And he had a very thick British accent, which for some reason makes it even funnier. He's just like, even the fries are sadder. It's just
yeah, true.
What are you talking about? And I remember because and this is a very Russian thing to do. They had a stockpile of ketchup, of course, from the McDonald's days. So what they did is they took a Sharpie and just covered up the M logo and kept selling it. It was a very Russian solution. And he was very upset about that. He's like, well, they just took a Sharpie and just covered up.
It's like proprietary infringement or something. That's got to be,
It's just, they were just being practical. They had this stockpile of ketchup packets from when it was branded differently. So they just marked them over with a Sharpie and kept selling those packets. So, but yes. And I do want to say about the whole, the Soviet Union, and this is very clear from reading, there's one book I'm attempting to read in Russian, which isn't easy for me because I'm only a B1 in Russian, so it's a bit of a struggle to read it, but by Vladimir Medinsky. He's the former Minister of Culture for Russia. So he's a very big Russian patriot and Russian nationalist. So I wouldn't call him pro-Soviet. He's more of like a Russian Empire type of guy. But I think a general attitude in Russia is that Soviet Union represents greatness because, the 1960s, 1970s really was up until that point the best time to be alive. Well, yes, cosmos, scientific achievements, is just quality of life is the best time in all of Russian history to be alive. It was just the highest standard of living ever up to that point. And I think a big thing about the hammer and sickle too is for Russians, it's unity. That was the last time when the whole family was together. Yep. And I think that's why Transnistria and Donetsk. Oh gosh, what's that place in that split off from Georgia? I'm drawing a blank.
Abkhazia.
They particularly like it, not because of course there are a large segment of the population that are still communists and vote for the Communist Party, but I think for everybody it represents unity too. So that's why those splinters, especially, it's like there's nobody who likes the Soviet Union more than people outside of Russia, it seems like, because they want to come back to the family, like Donetsk and Luhansk eventually did, Zaporozhye eventually did, Crimea did, Kherson did. Yes.
You made my point on that. Yes, togetherness, no fighting in between peoples, and that's a very materialistic approach, and that's what not only communists are about. You could argue that.
It's the opposite of what the Baltic midgets are doing, destroying monuments, tearing up graves, going full Menshevik, I'd say. So I don't see.
Let me wrap it up here, and let's get back to friend of the show, Scott Ritter, and his work, because he's kind of dedicated his life now to developing understanding between, Russian people and Westerners. And so I think that's just a great sentiment. And I think he's doing a great job. I was amazed when he was invited with the guy from
Ramzan
Chechnya.
Kadyrov, Chechnya.
Yeah, that was just amazing. And he's just talking to, 20,000 Chechen military people about, hey, Americans and Russians, there's nothing in, we don't have a problem. It's the leaders, the misleaders of our country specifically, that's the problem. But, unity is definitely the answer. I guess that was my point. But we have been going an hour and 45 minutes, hour 46 minutes. Does anybody have any burning topic to discuss, or should we end it here?
I just really want to thank the guys on the bottom row for being extremely generous with your time.
It's always good to be here.
And articulate. Thank you so much.
It's deliberating for the mind. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
We will have you both back soon. We should be broadcasting again on Tuesday, unless anything comes up, but we should see you on Tuesday. Thank you very much, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.